Let's turn to the Conservatives now. A little earlier, I spoke to the Shadow Housing Secretary, Kevin Hollinrake. Kevin Hollinrake, do you agree with those who say that it's time for a new regulator for the water industry?
Well, good morning. I mean, I'm not against regulation. We won't see cleaner rivers if we don't get good regulation. So I'm worried it might just be shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. So it's really important the regulator is effective, and we put in a lot of measures to give OFWAT more powers to regulate the water industry, and lots of those things were very effective. But nevertheless, there's a lot more to do. So I welcome what's been announced today, halve the number of sewage outflows by 2030. All those things are possible because of the measures we put in place, but clearly more needs to be done. And I support good regulation if it's effective.
You talk about the measures you put in place, and forgive me if this is a cheap jibe, but you know that's what we journalists do. Some would say that you launched the Titanic when you privatised the water industry.
Well, I don't accept that. I don't think any of the major parties is, maybe Reform are, but are proposing a renationalisation of the water industry. We've seen £200 billion of investment since we privatised the water industry, and that investment just wasn't happening when they were owned by the public sector. So that's.
But the water companies themselves say that the problem is that there's not enough investment. They are saying they need another, getting on for 300 billion over the next couple of decades. Now, that's not going to happen when they've also got to answer to shareholders. And by the way, shareholders are not sort of terrible American capitalists or whatever. They're pension funds. So they're in a bind, aren't they? And you created that by privatising the industry.
Well, of course, shareholders need to see a return. People won't invest if you don't see a return. But in a situation where you've got a private sector monopoly, it's perfectly possible to produce surpluses to return to shareholders whilst investing. Now, if in a nationalised scenario, the one you're outlining, well, the choice isn't to shareholders, it's to taxpayers. And where is the priority going to be? Is it going to be building new schools, new hospitals, or is it going to be investing in replacing the antiquated system we have in the UK that's been around here since the Victorian era? That's the problem we've got. You've got a Victorian-era sewage system, and you've got climate change, which is driving these different weather patterns. So that's the challenge you've got. I think you're more likely to see that sustained investment. In fact, we have seen that sustained investment in a private sector situation.
Yeah, but in the private sector situation, you dodged the choice by saying, OK, let the private sector deal with it. And actually what ended up happening is that the private sector, of course, it has invested more, but it's invested more by charging bill payers a lot more. In London, some bills have gone up by 50%. Surely that's not what you had in mind when you privatised it.
Well, if you adjust it for inflation, actually water bills are much lower than they were 20 years ago. That's the reality of this. At the same time,
nobody's adjusting wage increases for inflation. The point is we're having to pay more of our hard-earned.
In cash terms, you're paying more, but adjusted for inflation, you're paying less. That's the reality. But whether this is privatised or nationalised, and I think it's better in a private sector environment, difficult choices have to be made. I do not think you're going to see a government decide to invest in our antiquated Victorian-era sewage systems if they've also got a choice of whether they build new hospitals, new schools. All these difficult choices have to be made. The answer to this is good regulation, making sure that these water companies can't pay bonuses where there has been fault on behalf of the water companies, or restricting dividends. All those things are happening. You saw Ofwat, the regulator, fined Thames Water £18 million and reclaimed the £130 million dividend it paid to one of its sister companies. So all this thing can happen in regulated environments. At the same time, Thames Water invested £5 billion in the Thames Tideway Tunnel. So all these things can happen. At the same time, you're trying to provide good water at good value for those consumers.
The failure of the water network is not just a problem about sewage and water, but it's an obstacle to economic growth. Does it bother you, or does it concern you, that the Environment Agency blocked the building of 7,000 homes in Oxford for the best part of a year because of concerns about water supply?
Well, we need to have a system where we build infrastructure more effective, be it houses or reservoirs. All these things need to happen. We're not building enough reservoirs. That's something I'm dealing with as part of the planning changes. There's a planning bill going through Parliament now that should make it easier to build reservoirs, to improve the water supply, so we don't have that block on new homes. But there's no doubt we've gone backwards in terms of our ability to deliver infrastructure in this country. That's why we propose reforms whilst in government. That's where we'll support some of the reforms the government's due to make in the planning infrastructure bill, although there's some things we're not happy about at all.
Do the reforms that you support include, for example, or should they include, taking away the power of organisations like Natural England and the Environment Agency to stop new developments, for example, in housing? Because the government said they were going to do that, but actually they apparently now coming forward with amendments that will give Natural England an effective veto. Where are you going to stand on that?
Well, the answer is yes, we do want to take away those powers in certain circumstances. For example, and we tried to do that through the planning reform whilst we were in government. We proposed an amendment. Currently, there's over 100,000 new homes due to be built. They've been stopped being built by Natural England because of something called nutrient neutrality. This is phosphates and nitrates getting into water supply. And the house building sector has very little impact on those kind of problems. Yet they've been blocked from being developed. That can't be right. It can't be right. It costs 8 times as much to build a kilometre of high-speed rail in the UK compared to France. There are many things we've got wrong in this system.
Oh, so you want to get rid of nutrient neutrality?
In terms of house building, I don't think the house building industry is responsible for nutrient neutrality. Largely, that's catchment area, the solutions around catchment area farming.
All right. We heard this week from the Reform Party that they won't be able to reduce council tax, given the statutory commitments of local authorities, particularly adult social care. I don't want to get into the issue of whether you think reform are good or not good, but I think it's interesting. Do you think the time has now come to rethink the local council financing? How many councils do you expect to fail in the next year or so, and what would you do about it?
Well, one thing I must say about the whole point, what Zia Youssef said on that, is that we've got to take responsibility for our promises in terms of politics. Saying you're going to do one thing prior to an election and then do something completely different. There were huge promises made about council tax cuts. We said that couldn't be done, and that's because of the sustainability of local government finances. The answer to your question is yes, we need to look at this differently, of course, and that's the one luxury you have in opposition is taking a few years to look at exactly how we do that. There are real strains on the system. Most of this spend you see in local authorities are statutory responsibilities given to it by Parliament. We've got to look at those statutory responsibilities, make sure that it is an affordable system. Otherwise, these councils are going to fall over. There's no doubt social care is a huge problem for local authorities. So is children with special educational needs, home and school transport. There are huge pressures on the system. It's wrong that anybody could say, we can run this differently, we do a bit of cost cutting and we'll solve all these problems and cut council tax. That's just not realistic.
So actually, you've got these policy groups that you're putting together.
Commissions, yeah.
Commissions. Will they consider the reform of council tax, which hasn't been reformed, now, for nearly 35, 40 years?
Well, it depends what you mean by reform. What I am concerned about...
Well, just revaluation of tax.
Well, I'm concerned about that. I think that's a wrong thing to do. This government says is going to go there. It means effectively a wealth tax on expensive properties. I think that's a wrong thing. I don't like wealth taxes. I think...
Well, you've just been telling me how much you need to reform, and the simplest reform, you're basically going, no, you can't do that, because some rich people will be cheesed off about it.
Well, you're making a false choice. You think this is all about raising more tax. I don't believe that. I think there are ways of running a system differently that does mean councils have sustainable finances without putting more tax, without levying more tax.
Well, I don't get this. You've just been telling me the pressures on councils because of adult social care, they're going to need more money. So where's the money going to come from if it's not from tax? I mean, you need to level with the electorate, don't you?
Yes, we do. And I'll be very clear. This is not just about raising more money. You can reshape the system. There are other ways of delivering adult social care needs and...
Does reshape the system mean cuts?
I'm not saying anything in terms of our future policy right now because we haven't got those policies together.
Okay.
I mean, one thing that Kemi Badenoch has said she would do. I mean, look where Keir Starmer is now in terms of he's come into government, promised the earth, U-turn time and time again, winter fuel allowance, on welfare, all these U-turns, because he hasn't properly thought through what he's going to do.
Very interesting, but you were just about to tell me what Kemi Badenoch's going to do, which I'm more interested in.
Which Kemi Badenoch is going to make sure we develop our policies in opposition so that they stand the test of time. Because one thing about Kemi is, in my experience, what she says she's going to do, she does.
All right. Well, OK, well, we'll have to wait and see, it sounds like. One quick question. There are protests about an asylum hotel being reopened in Epping, near London, on Friday. How worried are you about the prospect of further unrest on this issue?
Yeah, I'm very worried about it. I mean, I was down in Hillingdon this week looking at where they've got the highest level of asylum seekers per capita in the country. I'm very worried about this, and we're seeing numbers going up in terms of the small boat crossings, up 40% this year. So we need a solution to this, and we had a solution. And there's no other way you can tackle this without the deterrent. We had a solution, which is Rwanda. We know people would not come to this country if they thought they would then be sent to Rwanda and have their asylum claim assessed in Rwanda. That's the reality. That's the only solution. There's no only thing that'll work, and Labour scrapping that, something we passed after they opposed it 134 times in Parliament. We eventually passed it, and then they scrapped it.
Kevin Hollinrake, thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks, Trevor.